Hi everyone, this is Yllaiza. For this video, we were having an experiment. Yes, experiment. But first, we were having an experiment about filtration. But before I start, let me define what filtration is all about. So before we proceed in our experiment, let me introduce to you the materials that I will be using. These are the materials that I will be using. First, the plastic bottle, so I cut it into half. Second is cotton, pebbles, or a gravel. Next is charcoal, sand, and lastly, the dirty water that I will be using in filtration. So the first thing we should do is to place the bottle upside down and put the cotton. Second is the sand. And the third one is the charcoal. Then the gravel or the pebbles. And last, the dirty water. So we put it into the filter. So kindly observe. By these pebbles or gravels, it helps to filter out the larger sediments, the sand to filter out the fine impurities, the charcoal remove contaminants and impurities by absorption. So by this, clear water is on its way. The second experiment that I will do is the experiment about osmosis. But before that, let me define what osmosis is all about. But before I'll start in our experiment, let me introduce to you the materials that I will be using. These are the materials that I will be using in our experiment. First is vinegar. Second is egg. Isa lang ka egg at gamitin ko kasi kasaban pa. And the third one is the jar. Yeah. So the first thing we should do is place the egg in a jar and put the vinegar in a jar. This is the egg and the vinegar. So we should be patient and wait for 7 days. As you observe, the bubbles forming around the shell is called the carbon dioxide. And then the vinegar is an acetic acid. And the eggshells are made up of calcium carbonate. The acetic acid and vinegar reacts with the calcium carbonate in the eggshells. So this is the egg and the vinegar now. So the third experiment that I will show you today is all about solution. So, what is solution? A solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances. It is always transparent and light can pass through with no scattering from solute particles. So these are the materials that I will be using for our experiment. first is a glass of water, a salt, and a spoon. So the first thing we should do is to put the salt in the water. And mix it well. After 2 to 3 minutes, so what you observe, did you see the salt or not? As you observe, there is no salt because it is called homogeneous mixture. Homogeneous mixture, only one piece that we see. We didn't see the mixture that we mix, which is the salt. So only water that we can see now. So this is what we call a solution, because solution is only one piece that we can see, only the water. But there is another characteristic for solution. So this is the other characteristic for solution, that the light can easily pass through the glass. So yeah. So light can easily pass through the glass. Thank you. For the fourth experiment that I will demonstrate is an example of diffusion. Before I start, let me define what is diffusion. So diffusion is the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. So these are the materials that I will be using in our experiment. First, we have 2 cups, one filled with warm water and one filled with cold water. And we will be also using food coloring. This one is color orange, while the other one is color violet. So first, I will be using color violet on the hot water. So kindly observe it. After that one, we will now use the orange color to the cold water. So the first thing that is different from the two is their temperature. So as what we have observed in the experiment, when I drop the food coloring in the warm water, the disperse of color is really fast, while it was opposite in the cold water. When I drop the food coloring in the cold water, the disperse of the food coloring is really slow, slower than the one warm water. So for the last experiment that I will demonstrate is an example of concentration. These are the materials that I will be using in our experiment. A 5 glass of water, and also spoon and a food coloring. So the first thing we should do is to add 5 drops of food coloring in cup number 1. For cup number 2, we should add a 4 drops of food coloring. And also, for cup number 3, should add a 3 drops of food coloring. And for the 4th cup, we should add a 2 drops of food coloring. And the cup number 5, you should add a 1 drop of food coloring. After that, we should stir it. So what we have observed, the cup number 1 is darker and getting lighter with each cup. So this is an example of concentration.